we're gonna
We're having fun. Maharaj is up. Maharaj gives us a class. We are so.
Okay, we can't hear you so well. Your connection is not so good there today. Okay, so we're gonna, but happy to see you all. Okay, we're gonna dive into Bhagavad Gita now. Can somebody say where we are? We don't have Marie with us. Marie is always very good at remembering where we are. Did we finish? I think we finished chapter 3, right? We began chapter 4. That's right. We went through those verses, yada, yada, hi, dharma. So you went through those verses. Yes, I think that's where we left off, right? Verse number 8 of chapter 4. Oh, sorry, Chintamani, were you saying something?
She was saying that she needs a better internet, so she is doing that.
Okay. So we're okay. Sorry, Chintamani. Okay, so I think we finished off on verse number 8 of chapter 4. And just to review them again, these verses 7 and 8, they are, as I said, every good Hindu knows these verses. And we also played that little intro from that Mahabharata drama, where there's a musical rendition of these verses, which I like very much. And so we were discussing this also recently in one of our classes, that these verses are describing the purpose for the Lord's descent in the world. When he comes in that Yuga avatar aspect, to spread the religion of the age, to rescue the devotees, and to destroy the evil, wicked persons. This is described in these verses, which you just went through. Then going on to verse number 9, this is also a well-known verse. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvata chaktva deham punarjanma naiti mamiti sarjana, also quoted often by our gurus. One who comes to know thus the truth of my pastimes of divine birth and activities does not undergo rebirth. So what is being said? There's a few important points here. So Krishna is saying Janma means his birth, karma, his activities, divyam, they are divine. So this is an important thing to bear in mind as we become acquainted with Krishna Leela. Because on the surface, Krishna's activities appear very ordinary, and the fact that he even takes birth, right, Janma, you wouldn't expect that the Supreme Lord would take birth. He must eternally be existent, right? But this is part of his aprakrita Leela, his apparently ordinary, his human-like play. And there's of course a whole science behind that, the science of divine rasa, divine ecstasy and relationship. There's a science to why Krishna chooses to appear. His highest manifestation appears in this deceptively simple and ordinary manner. Maybe we won't go into all of that now. So it is like a caveat here. As you are hearing about my Leela, remember it is apparently ordinary, but it is all divyam. This is all something on the surface. It is an appearance. It is like a drama, that he takes birth, that he has ordinary activities. He has marriages and children. And in his earlier years in Vrindavan, he's a cowherd boy, and he has been so many relationships with parents and friends and lovers, right? They're parallel to human activity, to human life. But don't be deceived by that. They're all divyam. Don't be deceived by what you see on the objective side. Behind that, it is categorically different from anything that takes place in this ordinary plane, this worldly plane. It is all of divine nature. And if you can come to understand that, if you can come to understand this divine layer of existence, then you will be liberated. And also another thing here, is that it says here that after giving up this body, he attains me, right? But our gurus also explain that this doesn't necessarily mean only when that physical action takes place, but on a conscious level, if we transcend that physical plane, that objective plane, that even while present in this body, in this world, we will begin to taste that divine experience. And there's also that famous verse which is coming to mind. How does it go? That Jivan Mukta, maybe Chinmoy Prabhu remembers that, or Chaitanya Mai maybe. What is that verse? That one who lives, one who speaks, acts mentally, bodily, verbally, they're always in the mood of dedication, then they are Jivan Mukta Sa Uchyate. They are liberated while living in this world. Iha Yasya, that's it. Iha Yasya. Thank you, Chinmoy Prabhu. Chinmoy Prabhu is so expert. Here it is in our chat. Iha Yasya Harir Dasya Karmana Manasa Gira. Let me open it. Iha Yasya Harir Dasya Karmana Manasa Gira. So one who serves the Lord through their karma, their activity, through their manasa, through their mind, and gira, that means their speech, vakya. Nikila shvapya vastasu, bit of a tongue twister, jivan mukta sa uchyate. Now, even while living in this world, they will be liberated. And I myself and some of us here, we met one Jivan Mukta in our life. our Guru Dev, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj. And it really is an extraordinary experience to see someone, observe someone who's like apparently here, physically here, but at the same time, it's very clear that they're not here, simultaneously. That all their activity, all their movement, all their speech is regulated in consideration of a higher plane. Everything that they do and speak is relative to another world. They're not in this world. So we had that, we had that experience to witness how such a thing is possible. And another cool thing I wanted to share about this verse. This because I heard this on one tape of Srila Gurudev a few years ago, this tatvata. Actually, maybe it was in an article that Shuddha Shava wrote. It was a comment of Gurudev, but it may have been in an Shuddha Shava retelling it. I can't remember actually. Maybe I heard it directly. But anyway, Gurudev, he and this is an example of how in every word from our gurus, in every word of the scripture, there is infinity there. Like you could literally get stuck on one verse for, several days, several weeks. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave for a month at one time, he was visiting Dhaka, what is now Bangladesh. For 1 month, every day, he was giving a lecture on the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So there is infinity in every word of the divine shabda, the divine sound revelation coming down. And so this is a nice example of that. So Gurudev, he in this one place, he pointed out this. So you see this word tatvata, right? Which is translated here as the reality, or you could also say truth. So one who comes to know this reality, this truth, it's saying, they will be liberated, right? So Gurudev, he explained that what this means is to know, this is like another angle, another way of seeing it. It means to know the substance of what Krishna consciousness is. That, you could also say like what we refer to as paramahamsa vision. Welcome to Dana and Krishnandrani, who've also joined us. So for those of you who aren't familiar, remember, I have to remember this Thursday meeting is meant to be especially for new people. So we want to break everything down. For those who aren't familiar, paramahamsa literally means great swan. Swan is, hamsa is swan, and para, great. So this is often used in Vaishnava discourse to describe great souls. Because it is, why? Because it is said that swans, they have this special ability that if you give them milk mixed with water, they are able to just extract the milk and they can leave the water behind. So in the same way, great souls in this world, the pure Vaishnavas, they have this ability to extract the spiritual essence in every situation, to perceive the divine connection in everything. They're seeing everything relative to the higher reality. They're not stuck in this limited provincial world of their own mind and senses, but everything is seen in connection to the higher plane. And they're also extracting what is beautiful, what is divine in any given situation. And then our Guru Day, our Guru Day said, this is what this Tattva is referring to, that in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we're able to understand what is essential and how to apply the teachings in the appropriate time and place. And he also gave an example. It's a famous example. Many of you are familiar with this, of Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj, who was a dear godbrother of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, the founder of our mission. And he was also a very prominent, powerful preacher in the Gaudiya mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who is the great revolutionary who established the practice of Krishna consciousness in this modern age, established 64 temples all over India and started the movement of the teachings in the Western countries also, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Bhakti Saranga Goswami, one of his prominent disciples, you could say like one of our uncle gurus, he was a very bold preacher. And there's this one incident, we're told, when he was traveling throughout India, and I believe this was in Kashmir, that's what I recall. And sometimes they have some acquaintances, some friends, or, in the area where they were, and they would stay with them and their needs would be taken care of. But there were other times when there's nobody they know, and so they just have to rent some hotel room and take whatever food is available. So on this one occasion, they didn't have any contacts in the area, and so they went for a meal at some little restaurant. And in Vedic culture, this is perhaps not so easy to relate to in the Western world, but in the Vedic culture, there's a lot of appreciation for this, for like subtle energy and nuances in the plane of energy. And so onions are considered to be of a lower energy. So, many people think if they become vegetarian, that's a really big deal, but then once you get to that level, then there are many nuances, right? And so onions, garlic, they're considered to be what is called tamagun, means in the energy of ignorance. And these are things that, in the traditional, in our Western environment, and even amongst our Western communities, these things may not be observed so much, but in a strict Vedic environment, it would be very, these things would be followed very carefully. And it would be normally be unthinkable to take such things. And these things, of course, would never be offered to the deity. I mean, even, for example, in my experience in India, in our temples, they wouldn't offer chocolate. And in some of our temples in the West, even, they follow that, but not so much. But I remember once when I first started living in India, someone had given me some nice chocolate from the West, and I thought I was being very selfless. I gave it to one of the pujaris, the priests, to offer to the deities, and I thought I was being very generous and selfless, you know. And as some special thing, he actually took it, and I guess he offered. I don't know, maybe he ate it. I don't know. But I found out later that they don't offer it actually. You know, they won't normally take it. So even chocolate, you know, that's how strict they are. So anyway, this one occasion, going back to our story, Bhakti Saranga Goswami, he's sitting with this group, to a few of them, and they order some vegetable preparation and other things, and they've received the food, and they see that in the vegetable preparation there's some onions, and somebody in the group became alarmed and they said, oh, there's onions in this, we can't take it. But Bhakti Saranga Goswami, you know, he saw things differently. He's feeling that, you know, this, you know, the Lord has provided this food for us. Krishna Mahaprabhu has provided this food for us. This is prasad, you know, this is the Lord's grace. This is the meaning of prasad, right? It is grace. So what is coming to us in a moment of necessity, that is grace, by the blessings of the Lord. That is grace, that is prasad. So that was his vision, and he told that young man, brahmachari, oh, you are seeing onions, I am seeing Mahaprasad, you know, and he very happily took that. So Gurudev used that as an example, you know, that, you know, he overlooked the consideration of rules, regulations, scriptural restrictions, and all these things, you know, in consideration of the real spirit, the real essence of what spirituality is, what Krishna consciousness is. So it is a broad and essential way of perceiving and practicing. So yeah, tattvata, like what is the truth? In any given, it is a nice meditation as we go throughout our daily lives and practice, you know, and we face different circumstances. What is actually the essential element, the essential point in what is before us? And then how will we move in consideration of that? What is the tattvata? So that is, I think that's everything I wanted to say about that verse. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I just like to ask about that when, because it often happens in Bhagavad Gita where they say if you know something. So in this verse, you know, he's saying if you know about my pastimes, divine birth and activities, you will not undergo rebirth. So I mean, we know this. I mean, I've read it, I've heard it from my guru and everything, but I don't feel like I'm a liberated soul. I'm positive I'll have another birth in this mundane world. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about what they mean when they say no.
Well, I would love to hear how you would answer that.
Well, my thought is that this type of knowing is heart knowledge, not intellectual knowledge. Like this is revealed in your heart, and once it's there, once it's revealed in your heart, then there's no going back. But I would like to hear your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yes. This, you know, actually this, you know what, an interesting point is that I discussed this maybe last year with one devotee in Hungary, actually, Ravindra Krishna. He's a Sanskrit scholar, and he studied the scriptures, like the Vedas, to some extent. And one interesting thing he told me is that you see with some words, that their usage, their connotation changes. Because remember, some of the scriptures, they were presented, like there's a big span of time over which various Vedic literatures, you know, were presented to the world. And so he shared this interesting point that that there are some words which in an earlier age, they had one connotation, then in a later age, they took on a different connotation. And so one of those words is the word gyan, which actually is not the word used here, but for the purposes of this discussion, you know, it's relevant as a case in point. That, you know, like nowadays, like in you know, gyan kind of has a lower, more of an undesirable connotation, right? In the, like in our, from what, I don't know if I can say exactly from what period. From Srimad Bhagavatam actually doesn't really give gyan such a good name. Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a later scripture. Srimad Bhagavatam is the final Vedic, like official Vedic scripture. And gyan is kind of dissed there. You know, gyan does not have a good name in Srimad Bhagavatam. But in earlier scriptures, it was used differently. You know, later on, it came to indicate more like dry knowledge. But in, you know, just dry theoretical empirical knowledge. But in earlier scriptures, it was associated more, the idea behind it more, and you can also see this if you look in Sanskrit dictionaries, is more of a like realization, you know, more on that level. Even as I recall, it had connotations with an experiential knowing. So you know, saying all of that to say, yes, there are different types of knowing, and absolutely the knowing, this here the word is veti, right, that is being used, knows. Yes, this is referring to a different, not the dry theoretical type of knowing, not the bee outside the jar of honey, you know, describing what the honey looks like, describing the chemical composition of the honey, but we're talking about the bee that's drowning inside the jar of honey, tasting that honey, but happily, a happy drowning, not a killing drowning. Becoming intoxicated, let's say, becoming intoxicated on the honey. That's what we're talking about. They're knowing it. So that bee who's tasting the honey and that bee who's looking at the honey, they're both experiencing one kind of knowing, right? But they're very different. So yes, we are speaking of the tasting kind of knowing, realization kind of knowing. And that, of course, implies sevan mukata, sevan mukahi jiva dao, swayam eva sporta dao. That implies necessarily one has approached through the path of dedication, service, self-giving, self-sacrifice. That is what makes it real. That is what makes it real. That we're not just a spectator watching the game, but we're in the game, we're part of the game. So yes, I'm glad you raised that point, Prabhu. It is an important point. Okay, any other comments or queries from anyone, or should we go on? Okay, so then we did chant these verses last week. That's why I haven't begun like that today. Then verse 10, free, I think we did read the translation, but we can read it again. Free from attachment, fear, and anger, many persons have taken shelter in me, absorbing their hearts in my services, hearing, chanting, and remembering. Purified by, this is wonderful, purified by knowledge and the fire of ordeal in my service, they attained divine love for me. So this is a kind of a nice example of how because remember, what is the specialty of this edition? It is emphasizing bhakti. So this isn't actually Bhagavad Gita as it is. we're a little biased on the bhakti side here. This is not as it is, sorry. And Gurudev, actually and I think I was actually there in the room, it was in Navadvip. Gurudev was discussing this one day, and maybe Chinmoy and Chaitanya Mai were there too. Gurudev, he was discussing one day how this is one of the specialties of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's edition, that he's drawing out bhakti at every point in Gita. Is that we were discussing this point when we started out this new journey of Bhagavad Gita, that, you know, Bhagavad Gita can be read on two levels, that there is the as it is version, you know, there's the step-by-step development going through different stages of yoga. There's, you know, karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, then bhakti yoga, right? There's that way that you can perceive this development of Bhagavad Gita. But you can also read bhakti at every point. You can see how, for example, instructions of karma yoga and jnana yoga, yoga of knowledge, yoga of action, how they are also relevant, applicable in bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. So this is one of the points about our Gita that Gurudev, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, they've made the connection, the link with bhakti all the way through. And you know, actually, this is a project for the future for some expert person, that in our, because this is our English edition, right? But we have a Bengali edition too. And there are some things in our English edition which aren't in the Bengali one. And there are also some things in the Bengali edition which are not in the English one. Because I know on that day when Gurudev was speaking about this point, he quoted some lines from the word for word in the Bengali edition. I realized they're not, I looked it up, they're not in the English one. So the word for word in the Bengali one is a little more developed, richer. But anyway, here in this translation, we see an example of this. So this word tapasa, right? Tap is referring to austerity, which normally is associated with something dry, right? You know, you have these yogis who will, or maybe tapasvi is the better term to use. You know, they'll sit under the hot sun in a ring of fire and you know, all kinds of things like this. And they acquire, you know, siddhis. They develop these, you know, subtle powers through this. And I don't know, the type of sukriti or punya, you can say. You know, these like credits that you can use in the future for a better life. So normally this tapa is referred to this, like dry austerity, you know, fasting, all these things. But here in our Gita, it's translated as the fire of ordeal in my service. So, you know, so you see how this idea of austerity also has its place in the cultivation of bhakti, right? That in our attempts to dedicate, to offer, to serve, there's also some austerity involved, you know, in setting aside our ego, throwing our ego into the fire, die to live, right? Die to live, that we are throwing our ego, trying to throw our ego in the fire of self-sacrifice, fire of self-dedication every moment. And there's some burning. In that burning of the ego, there's going to be some pain, right? There must be. But there's also that bright, beautiful, golden person who comes out as a result. You know, gold is purified by fire. So this is I like this. This is a nice example. Purified by the fire of ordeal in my service. They attain divine love for me. Yeah, it's good. And it is, you know, this bhava, is used. That is mean bhava means like heart, love, devotion. Mad bhavam agata. They attained this bhav for me. So, this isn't like totally pulled out of someone's hat, like it is clear this is referring to bhakti. It is referring to devotion. This bhava, it's very clear. And then this verse 11, this is quite a famous verse also. This ye yatam amprapadyante tams tataiva bhajamyaham mama vart manuvartante tams tataiva wait, sorry, I got that mixed up. Ye yatam amprapadyante tams tataiva bhajamyaham. That as persons approach me, so I approach them. Mama vart manuvartante manushya parta sarvashaha. All persons ultimately follow my path. So this is a really interesting point. And welcome, Jayadev has joined us also. So this is a really interesting point. Krishna is saying that ultimately all persons, they are following me. And, this brings out, there are a lot of related discussions, to this statement here. One, for example, the concept of there being a power, an evil power that threatens God's existence, right? That's being debunked by this statement of Krishna. The idea that there are some things that are beyond God's control. That's all anything like that is being rejected. Any conception like that's being rejected. Everything's happening under his eye. There's nothing outside of God's control, nothing outside of his vision. And so that's one thing. And also another interesting point that comes out of this is that if we want to be cheated, we will be cheated, right? That ultimately he will give us what we want to see, what we want to believe, what we want to experience. He will enable that, and people talk about this confirmation bias, right? And it's a real thing, and it's easy to debunk these things in ourselves, right? It's easy to see how wrong they are. So why not on a bigger scale, right? It is possible, that we have one particular concocted idea, and then we're fixed on that, and then everything that happens around us is confirming that. We're seeing how everything can fit through our little filtered version of things, and it can be very silly. It can even be very silly. And then we tend to gravitate towards other persons who have the same concocted ideal as ourselves, right? And that, right, of course, with the World Wide Web, that facilitates that to a massive scale. And there are forums for all kinds of crazy things, right? And all kinds of, I don't want to offend anyone. Maybe we have some members in our group who subscribe to some of these theories, so we don't need to go there. We're not here to debate those things, but there are all kinds of ideas out there, and for any idea that you have, it'd be very easy to find a million others who have the same idea. So it doesn't mean it's true. Just because you have that idea and others who are just as crazy as you have the same, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means a lot of people are crazy, right? So it's a very profound point, actually, that we will see what we want to see. We will believe what we want to believe, and the environment will come to support that. We're actually projecting on the environment, and there are many others who are doing the same, and so we will come together and support one another in our respective projections. And the Lord will also help that. Krishna is also indicating that I'll support you in that, for different reasons. One reason that, if if we're not ready for a higher level of truth, Krishna is not going to force that on us. He wants everyone to come at their own pace when they're ready to a higher level of understanding. That is one point. You know? And another point is that it also, this system, it's kind of like a filter system, you know, where the Srila Sridhar Maharaj explains it in this way: less diseased patients are protected from the more diseased patients. If you just have a big hodgepodge where everything's mixed together, then those who are more sincere, who are truly earnest for higher truth, then they don't have a good chance, because everything's just jumbled together. So there needs to be some separation. And this is, and a good example of this is the appearance of Buddha, Lord Buddha, right? Because we're told that Buddha is actually an avatar of Krishna. And he came to protect the purity of the Veda. But in order to do that, he had to tell everyone the Veda is wrong, don't follow the Veda. Because they got it so twisted, right? We hear that animal slaughter had become so pervasive, and persons were justifying it on the basis of the Vedas. You know, the Vedas give some allowances. They accommodate to some degree the eating of meat and alcohol in particular circumstances for particular persons, but it's not meant to be a widespread thing. It's not meant to be a license to do it every day of the year. And so Buddha, Krishna had to come as Buddha to tell, you know, it's like if a teacher is trying to explain something to their students and they're seeing that they're filling up the whiteboard, you know, trying to explain, and they see no one's getting it. The teacher will say, okay, let's you know, wipe the board, cleans. It's called tabula rasa, means like a clean slate. So the teacher will like wipe the boards. Okay, we're starting over. But now try to understand in this different way. Let's wipe the board, start over. Like, forget everything I said before. Now start over. You know, so in the same way, when the Lord saw the Vedas were being so misunderstood and abused, he had to come and say, look, forget the Veda. You don't need the Veda. Just listen to me. And then he presents this simple philosophy of ahimsa, non-violence in the form of Buddhism. And so that was, you know, to create this kind of filter system, a protective system to protect the purity of the Veda. And then later, then he sends Shankara, who starts to move things slowly back towards the Veda. Then you had later, then the Vaishnava Acharyas, Ramanuja, Madhva, they come, and finally Mahaprabhu as the cream on the cake, you know, giving the essence. So we see how it is necessary at times for there to be systems in place for persons of a lower understanding, lower conception. They need to be accommodated also. You know. So it's a very profound point that ultimately it comes down to our own sincerity, our own purity, and our own sincere desire for the highest truth. You know, it's a very profound point, and there's actually so much that can be said about this, because what it shows is that ultimately there needs to be this level of maturity within spiritual practitioners that you know I'm getting as much as I want or need. You know, I can't depend or blame anyone or the environment. It's not about following some particular rule, particular regulation. These things can ultimately become like crutches, right? Where we just get fixed on some external mode of practice. But ultimately, you know, tatramolyam apimolyam ekalam, right? That lolyam, that inner desire, that's what it all comes down to in the end. That's what it all comes down to in the end. Do we have that desire? Are we going to take responsibility for our progress? Do we have that degree of sincerity and inner need within us? And this came up in another meeting recently. Maybe it was this meeting. No, it was in a SoCal discussion a few days ago. But I like this story so much. It always feels so relevant, of someone in our temple in Navadvip who was stealing some of the resources of our temple. And when he was an older member, an older devotee, and our Gurudev heard about it, but didn't say anything. And then that man, he found out that our Gurudev had found out and got very anxious. Some of you know this story. And so he went to our Guru and like apologizing profusely, please forgive me, and please punish me, chastise me. But our Gurudev didn't say anything. And then our Gurudev told him, I don't have anything to say to you. And he said, because if you were a new devotee, then I would understand you don't know the difference between right and wrong. So I would explain to you. But you know what's right and you know what's wrong very well. So what's the point? Like, I'm not just interested in like vindictively punishing someone. Like, what is this all about ultimately? This is about our own inner heart's desire to progress. And if you don't feel that, then what are we going to do? Like, this is your issue ultimately. I'm not just here to run an organization. Our Gurudev was not about running an organization. If he was about running an organization, then we would have a much more organized and materially successful, community. Gurudev valued the individual over anything else. And he was about like nourishing that fire on an individual level in the hearts of the practitioners. So if if Gurudev wanted to do things in a pragmatic way, according to the HR manual, then he would take that person aside and would correct him and maybe throw him out of the temple. But Gurudev's saying like I'm here because I want to share the beauty and the joy of what spiritual life is. That's what I'm about. And if you can get that, then that's wonderful. Let's all go in happily together. But if you don't get that, then okay, you don't get it. What can I do? That's your loss. That's your, we're not, if you're stealing money from our temple, you're actually losing. We're not losing anything. Materially speaking, we're losing money and you're gaining money, but spiritually speaking, you're the one losing. So this is your problem. It's your loss if you don't feel this enthusiasm, you don't feel this joy. It's your loss. You're the one missing out. So and you know all these things already. So what can I tell you? What's the point? There's no point. It's very, very interesting, very, very profound. So ultimately, it comes down to that, isn't it? In the final consideration, how much do we want it? How much are we taking responsibility for that and trying to move towards that? It's a deep meditation. There are so many, in the second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's this interesting phrase, Vastava Vastu, means like the truth of the truth, the real reality. Because there are so many conceptions of what reality is. And actually they all have their existence to some extent, but the only differentiation is that some realities have a temporary relevance and others have an eternal relevance, right? So there's the temporary reality, or you could call the false reality. And then there's the eternal reality, the absolute reality, the true reality, the real reality. So which one are we tapped into? We can go out and experience so many things. We can pick up so many books and read. We can go into a library or a bookshop. Every book is telling a different reality. We can turn on the television. Every channel is going to be telling a different story. And we can pick up one of those threads and go out and follow it And we can have thousands of experiences that are confirming that, right? So they all have some existence, and they're all pertaining to different layers. Some are pertaining to the body, the physical bodily layer. Some are pertaining to the mental layer. Some are pertaining to the intellectual layer. We can go and we can meet on that level with these different realities, and we can confirm them 1,000, 1,000,000 times over. So they have their existence. But we also, then there's that little voice in the background saying, well, in the final estimation of things, how far will these things take us? You know, what are they worth? You know, at the moment of universal dissolution, did it matter that you had 1 million Facebook followers? Did it matter that you were Miss Universe? No, that you were more beautiful than anyone else, or that you had more money than anyone else, that you were the president of the United States, or, right? In the moment, these things, like, you know, you could watch movies and see some world events and you'll be crying, you know, feeling the emotion and the reality of these things. But what about at that moment of universal devastation? Do they mean anything? What about when you're on your deathbed and you're about to breathe your last breath? Did it matter, you know, that you were the best in this field or that field, that you graduated from Oxford or Harvard or whatever, that you were the businessman of the year in America in 2023 or whatever? Did those things matter? You know, and our Gurudev, he liked so much that verse, Thomas Gray, right? The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth I gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. So many great and wonderful, wondrous things in this world, in the sphere of literature and art and culture and health and fitness and money, and so many exciting and interesting things, so many wonderful, extraordinary things going on. We won't deny that. But will they matter at that last moment? That is the question. So what can we do in this moment to connect with what is meaningful, with what is true from that highest standpoint, from that final consideration? This is what Bhagavad Gita is about. You know, this is what Bhagavad Gita is trying to help us, you know, that higher truth Bhagavad Gita is trying to help align us with. So yeah, very, very deep point here. And then we have, you know, from time to time, we have these great saints, these great messiahs who come and they affirm that higher reality in the most powerful and striking way. Srila Sridhar Maharaj uses the analogy of like lighthouses, and in one place, in a very general way, he mentions like Muhammad, Jesus, like so many of these great messiahs, they come to this world and they're like these lighthouses of faith, you know. What to speak of in the Vaishnava line, the finest, purest line, you know, they're like these lighthouses of faith, standing and proving, declaring their experience of the supreme entity along these lines. A very beautiful expression of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. They are declaring, proving their experience of that higher reality. Everything that you're feeling now in such a tangible, concrete way, that is all going to vanish ultimately. But there's a higher, more subtle plane, a permanent plane. Direct your attention there. And as Srila Sridhar Maharaj pointed out, also Socrates, the great philosopher, he died to prove that. He gave up his body to prove that, because his experience of that higher plane was so strong, so pronounced. He was ready to give up his body to prove that that higher plane exists, that afterlife does exist. So let us regulate our, you know, they hated him because he was ruining their hedonistic lifestyle. There's only one life. You know, every time I go to America, I kind of get educated on the current lingo. You know, I was trying to be, last week, I was trying to be cool. I was hanging out with the teenagers, with Jai Guranga and Ananda Krishna and some others. So I used the word dope. I was speaking about, I was thinking about something Gurudev had said, and I was like, that's dope. I thought I was being cool. And they said, sorry, Vishaka, like nobody uses that anymore. Now it's dank. Like it's dank now. Like, oh, sorry. But now I also heard another one this time, which I'd never heard before. I think from Narayani. What is it? YOLO, you only live once. I never heard that before. You know, you only live once. Chinmoy, are you going to say something?
Yeah, don't let Madhusudana Maharaj hear you speaking like that.
Excuse my language. It was the first and last time. Yeah, so I heard about this YOLO, you only live once, right? So Socrates, he rejected that view. You know, but see, the thing is, if you believe that, then it gives you this freedom, right? You can do whatever the heck you want because we only live once, right? So just do whatever you want. It gives a license for this hedonistic, wild, meaningless lifestyle, right? But if you understand, no, the soul is eternal. We need to think in terms of our future lifetimes, our eternal welfare. Then there's no excuse. So it's kind of like it ruins the party. But once you have some appreciation for higher things, then you see there's a higher party. And that lower thing loses there's no taste there any longer. So very, very, very much food for thought, all these topics. I saw Jayadev turned on his camera, but did you want to say something, Jayadev? Okay. Wow, so we only got through a few verses here. We just went through 3 verses. We didn't get to move forward, but as I said, like I said this last week, actually, these are very profound verses. There's so much here. So I'm really happy we were able to go in depth on these things. Well, maybe just as a taster for next week, we can just chant verse number 12. And then we'll just move forward next week. Kangshata karmanam siddhim yajanti hadevataha shipram hi manushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Persons who desire the fruit of their actions worship the gods, since in the human plane, actions swiftly bear fruit. So this is referring to what we often say in English, the demigods, the devas, the gods who are like the caretakers of the material plane, who are governing different functions, different aspects of the material plane. So it's kind of like fast food, quick results, like instant noodles type thing, right? If you want these kinds of instant results, then you want to approach the devas. But nowadays they also talk about slow food. There's fast. I actually have. I will show you. I have some slow food. This is a pot of cardamom, but it's called slow food. It's a real thing. So there's this antithesis to the fast food movement, right? Slow food. So Vaishnavism is like that. approaching Krishna is like that. We're in the slow food route. Maybe the results are a little, more difficult to attain, and there's more difficulty, more challenge involved. But in the end, you will be the gainer. In the end, the results will be infinitely superior. So, you can go into your fast food restaurant and get your burger and fries and get that instant gratification. You can drink that Coca-Cola and get that buzz, right, for a few minutes, but you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer afterwards. It's going to take your whole system down. But if you approach in consideration of your eternal identity, your eternal need, and you take the time, to make your, whole grain foods and make your healthy stews and so on and so forth, your organic, non-GMO produce and all these things, and it'd be a little more time consuming, a little more involved, a little more difficult. And in the beginning, it may take some time to adjust to the taste also. But ultimately, you will be the gainer. You'll be happier, you'll be more beautiful, you'll have more energy, and so on and so forth. So we're not interested in the quick fix, instant results agenda. We're ready for the long haul. We're ready to put in the time that's required, the time, energy, commitment that's required for the real thing. We'll wait however long we need to wait. That's not an issue. When Srila Sridhar Maharaj was asked, have you seen God? One of the things, there are different things that he said, but one of the things that he said was that, the real point is that I'm on the path. I'm on the real path. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. I'm not in a cheating path. I'm on the real path. And if that takes me thousands of lifetimes, I'm happy for that. That doesn't even matter. But that I'm on the path to the highest truth, that is what I'm interested in. That is what is meaningful. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. And as I said, I did promise that I'd do a tour. So I will stop our Bhagavad Gita discussion, unless does anyone else want to add any thoughts to any of that? Okay, well, then been a wonderful meeting with all of you. That was actually very inspiring for me to reflect on, and it's wonderful association. So I look forward to next week. And if anyone wants to stay on, I will do a little tour around where I'm at our beautiful West London ashram. Okay. All right. Shri Gauranga Sundar here. And so we're about to start some kirtan. Saraswati Deity's here. She's the manager here. Look, Chaitanya Mai is here.
Oh, Dhanavad. Nice to see you all.
Chinmoy,
Wow.
also.
Lovely to see you.
Dhanavad.
And Vishnu Priya Devi is here, visiting from Tijuana. She's also here and serving very nicely here.
Yeah, she's training Pujari Seva at the moment. So who are they? I know few of them.
Chaitanya Mai and Chinmoy and Jayadev and Chintamani. Oh, Chintamani maybe just dropped out. She's here. I don't know if you know them. Sulalita from Turkey, you may know her.
Okay. Dhanavad.
And Krishna Andrani from Turkey, you may know. She translated the Bhagavad Gita.
Maybe.
Probably met her. And then some new friends, Dana Nanda Krishna, who just took, he's the one you were talking about, was jumping a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
Are you there, Nanda Krishna? Maybe he's in the kitchen or something.
Okay.
And Lynn, another new friend in California.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Haribo.
Give
Can
him
you
a
take
minute.
them to see
Yeah, I'll take him to Sasia's. There are two different Wi-Fi connections, so at a certain point I may transition to the other one. There may be some breakage, but it should just be a few seconds. There's a Tulasi house, beautiful Tulasi house. This is a courtyard area here. Tulasi, and this is the back garden area. And then we have kitchen, prasadam room here. And Nakshi Didi visiting from Hungary with her daughter. She's busy with some of the kids here. And there's the deity's kitchen in here. And I'd like to take you outside as well, but I don't know if the connection will. Here is in the kitchen, and we have Gadadhar Prabhu of New Zealand, currently residing in Hungary, and he gives a lot of support to the London ashram. Some of you know Gadadhar Prabhu. Do you know Chaitanya Chinmoy Prabhu? He's here. Jayadev and Chintamani, you know, through the internet. Yeah. He's cooking chapatis. He's very good chapati maker. You witnessed a real chapati flip. Okay. And I'd like to show you, it's very beautiful, the front of the building too. It's an old Victorian schoolhouse. Beautiful. Okay, so we're on the side. I won't go around the front because I think the connection will, well, maybe it will hold. Let me see. This is the front garden. And there's a big sign at the front. So everybody sees Bhakti Yoga Institute here. Okay. And we're like a stone's throw from Heathrow Airport here, which was Gurudev's desire. Gurudev always thought about the convenience of the devotees, and he wanted something, when devotees are landing, they don't have to wait 2 hours. And if we were any closer to Heathrow, you wouldn't have to go through immigration. It's very, very close. Okay, now I forgot the code to get in. So, well, my dandavats all of you. I'll end here. Really wonderful meeting. Thank you all for giving your wonderful association.
Dandavat, Vishaka.
Thank you, Vishaka. I love the tour. Thank you for that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavats.
Dandavats. Thank you.